There will be a decline in other coastal industries.
Who's buying the shrimp?
The shrimp is exported, is one of their main exports in.
Exported to which countries?
Well, I buy it. Well, I don't buy it anymore. Now I know it's,
Canada is.
yeah, it's in
Do you
Canada.
think if Canada cannot export that good, it might start producing it itself?
Do you read the question?
If Canada wasn't exporting it from these countries, do you think it would, importing it from, at least trade. If they were importing from these countries, they would start producing it themselves?
Well, see, Canada doesn't have.
What would they?
It depends on the resources, but see, it all goes back.
Only on resources?
Well, for example, there's also the idea of the common property goods and the tragedy of the commons, which we just studied in class. And so that may not necessarily have the ability to import these goods, given the resources and given the atmosphere. And again, as we mentioned, we're not anti-trade. We need trade.
No. Would they produce it? Do you think there would be some level of production for shrimps? If the demand is so high, I'm sure there is a few people fish. I'm sure there will be a few people who will be willing to pay a very high price for fish.
There must be.
Yeah. So do you think we might start producing it?
Well, I'm not sure if Canada, is it around? Well, I'm not sure if Canada has the right natural,
Doesn't have a climate.
but I know that
Do you
it
think
has
they have
does. I know that it
artificial climate set up in place? It might be possible to have an artificial thing in place and start growing fish.
Indoor
Naturally,
swimming pool.
if it is environmentally sustainable, it's.
Why not? I mean, if I had money and we completely don't import from these countries, and then I realize that people are going to pay huge money. How much is you go in and get for this other food, you get $50, right? I can get $100, so there's no fish coming from anywhere else. So what stops me from investing and creating an artificial environment and producing this fish? We do that for tomatoes. We do that for roses.
Yeah, the greenhouses, they're an option, and
You
that's.
should be on this way also.
So, well, there's a limited trade, if it's moderated trade, a country can sustain themselves. If they develop it.
So we can produce it.
What I like to point light is that, for example, there are winners and losers to this trade. Winners may be people like us, who, even if we are able to develop this, and we are able to find shrimp or find tomatoes, on the other side, we have to keep in mind that this environmental degradation is completely affecting the economies and all the resources there, and it can lead to lower standards of life through air and quality, or air and water quality index. It can lead to the fact that there's so much pollution there that the industries suffer.
If it's important for the Chinese to breathe clean air, this is what I don't get. If it's important for the Chinese to breathe clean air, and that's more important than their income rising so they can buy a Buick, which seems to be the hot car in Beijing. Okay, if it's more important, then they can make that decision over there. They've decided to trade off clean air for a Buick. That's their choice.
The what trade literature and pollution paper and environment degradation from trade is really the basic assumption is, it is true as well, is that we don't want to spoil our environment. So what we end up doing is we end up bringing those goods from other countries.
Right.
Because the environment standards in those countries are much lower.
Right.
So, so Thailand is screwing up its land and its agriculture because it's growing shrimp farming, other regional crops. Now, if they don't care, then we might as well buy shrimps from them instead of spoiling our agriculture.
That's my point.
That's the basis for why trade hurts environment, because the environmental standards are different.
Right.
So we don't want to have bad environment. We don't want to be breathing in bad air. So we don't mind buying goods from other countries and let them breathe bad air. Right? So trade leads to environment issues because we don't have the same environmental policies all across countries. Right?
The point is that those negative externalities generated from Asia, they're not just affecting them, it's going to affect all of us, and that's our main argument, that it's not limited anymore, it's not just focused in one area. It's happening
Exactly.
everywhere.
So if we want trading, we'll probably be producing it ourselves. So how if eliminating trade is going to affect?
No, I think they would argue that we have to have something analogous to a sweatshop-free policies where we're not going to buy running shoes from sweatshops in Southeast Asia. We're not going to buy T-shirts from Joe Fresh in Bangladesh. And we're not going to buy manufactured products from Beijing where the environmentalism is being mucked up. So we've protected the rights of the workers for the guys who are making the shoes. protected the rights of the workers for the guys who are making the T-shirts. Let's protect the rights of the polar bears for the guys who are making the cars or the iPad things. So they're saying they're not against free trade, they're just against detrimental free trade. Or you're against sweatshop free trade. Yeah.
Not
So
only your
what I'm
benefit, for our
asking
benefit.
is
too.
the solution that you are providing, is the solution restricting trade? Is the solution putting in trade barriers, or is there a better solution?
Why can't we just say we're not going to buy sweatshop furniture? I've made that decision. I've said, I'm not going near Joe Fresh. In fact, when I go into a store now, I look at the label and I find out where it's from. I make sure it's not from Bangladesh or Vietnam or places like that. No, where is this from? I don't know. But the point is, as consumers, we can make that decision. We don't need regulation. We can just say, I'm not buying that.
Yeah.
The problem is most manufactured goods are from China, so how are we going to say no?
You can't be negative. Right, right.
If we go back to the fish example, country A is producing fish, and let's say Canada is importing fish. Now, country A decides to, they pick fish over environmental standards, and Canada says, okay, no, we don't want this, so let's import. But if we limit trade, that means that let's say we're only getting half the amount of imports of fish into Canada. That means that Canada is not only importing fish, but it's also making its own fish. That means that not only is that country creating environmental hazards, but this country is now too, instead of just importing it from there. So instead of, in my opinion, trade slows down the process of the environmental hazards spreading, but if both countries were to make fish, then environmental hazards are spreading like 2 times even more.
But with all due respect,
Can you answer that point?
the president of Loblaws or whatever it is, Joe Fresh, he was on TV and saying, we promise not to buy our T-shirt from Bangladesh anymore, or it's going to be from a regulated market. So they're doing what they're sort of saying, which is free trade, but. That's what they're saying. Free trade, but have a conscience. Don't buy from sweatshops. Don't buy from countries that are pollution.
But that's not restricting trade, that's restricting demand.
You can always buy
Okay,
from
yeah,
someone
that's
else, can't you?
So do you have an answer for that?
The point that specialization reduces pollution.
That if we want producing these products in countries where it is leading to pollution, we might be producing it in another place because the demand still exists.
Well, the thing is, if we were to produce it in Canada, or for example, all these goods in which we're not comparatively, don't have a comparative advantage, it would be more polluting.
It would be more polluting.
Well, see, that's but the thing is, then there's the exception to that argument in saying that environment and labor and labor standards and the quality of life are directly interconnected. And that was seen in the Battle for Seattle in 1999, where we're protesting the WTO standards because once the environments go, and once the environmental standards fall, then the actual quality of lives deteriorates, and through these industries are suffering, but the agricultural productivity is just completely dropping. And so I think it's an overstepping the boundaries to say that it doesn't matter. They want the looser environmental standards to increase foreign investment, but in doing that, it can create more danger by actually lowering the quality of life for everybody in these natural resource industries. So it's just not a sustainable way to increase your GDP and increase your trade. So we need the answer, the solution lies in the
But
emergence
you are
of...
answering a question which says we need trade because it's going to help us buy more consumable goods, right? It's going to increase GDP, right? Would your argument stand if I say that trade is going to make sure that instead of 300 million children dying in India, only 150 children will die in India?
I'm going to confuse this question.
So you are saying that these guys are saying, you know what, we want to trade because it's going to hurt our environment, that's okay, right? That's what you're saying. But actually, we want to travel in Buick And so we need to tell them that no, environment is important because it's going to come back to hurt us as well, right? Yeah. So would your argument still stand if I said, well, you know what, trade for these people means that instead of 300 million children dying that year, only 150 million children will die.
So you're essentially saying that higher unemployment, or higher employment levels.
These people who are working in the factories, these children that are working in the factories are on 5 rupees a day, but these 5 rupees means that they can get food, 1 meal in a day.
Please.
So would your argument stand in that case? It won't, right?
In that
Well,
case-
let them answer.
Okay, sorry. No, we could tell them the basis.
I'm just trying to.
You try to understand.
Non-verbal communication.
Yeah, the question is that,
Her question is this,
your
if
argument
you stop
is-
trade and you stop buying Joe Fresh t-shirts and the workers in those factories wouldn't make any money and their kids would die, would you be willing to pay that
Oh, forget
price?
about the kids.
Or the workers themselves, the whole family would die because they're not making any money. They need 5 rupees to buy their doll.
Because we are restricting trade.
Because you're restricting trade. Well, wouldn't that mean for a spillover effect for this?
Let's do her question a different way. How would you recommend that we continue to trade but do it ethically? Let's call it fair trade. No, seriously, though. How would you do it?
How would you, so well, let's think about the solution, right?
Yeah,
So these points they have made are really spell the story why people do trade, why countries do trade, right? Now, so your argument is that it's going to be hazardous to the environment because you would be importing a lot of shrimp, right? So is the problem that we are importing a lot of shrimp or is the problem that we are demanding more shrimp?
What's the
Let's
problem?
do the
Right?
t-shirt.
So you're saying, we can't control this population of these very demanding shrimp, so let's just tell them that we can't import it. Right? So restrict imports, so, and then they have no choice to say, okay, fine, we can't.
Well, let's hear their answer.
Right? That's what I'm putting them in a different way, right? So your argument is really that restricting imports is the answer, is it?
We're not saying restricting imports.
What do you want to
Lowering
do?
it, whatever.
Okay, well, we want environmental standard. Okay, the main concern is that by doing all this, environment will be so depleted that the effects will come back to haunt all of us. Not just people concentrating in pollution havens, but everybody else. Like, for example, floods in Calgary. When does that happen? So what the solution would be, we're arguing that with stricter
No.
environmental policy, if we were to restrict trade and if we were to restrict imports, that would encourage higher environmental standards in Canada.
Yeah.
They would say we want to be clean.
Yeah.
So that
So
would
if you,
produce.
so now if I say that, okay, you won't have, what did you have in Calgary?
Well, there are floods in Calgary. so-
Okay, if I said that, okay, now we have to think about floods in Calgary or 150 million children dying, or which one is more
But
important?
the Calgary, that's just
Can
another
you choose
example.
Too
If
many
you think about, I mean, the places in where it's,
How many
there are,
people
like,
are
for
affected in
example,
Calgary from floods?
well, I'm also thinking about what about the Fukushima nuclear collapse and around the world, these are
Nuclear
like,
collapse, right?
sorry?
Nuclear collapse, you're
Well, this is all due to
blaming-
environmental degradation, higher global temperatures, less stable environment, and
Is
so
it
these.
right to be blamed for population? You mentioned population and all those things that were leading to bad environment, and you said the government is great.
There's too many people, it's not sustainable, the rate at which people are consuming
Exactly.
goods.
How is trade leading to more population? People having more kids?
People are having more kids because
Oh, no,
Economies
actually,
are growing.
trade actually lowers the fertility levels. People have TVs instead of other, they have means of entertainment. It has
Okay,
lost population effect.
she's got a good question. Let's try to simplify it. The question is, I think, their argument is free trade increases the size of the pie, and hopefully, even if you're getting the same percentage of the pie, the piece is big. Everybody, anybody with any economic sense would agree with that. So they've got the easy side of the argument. Trade improves welfare, so to speak, or potential for welfare. Now, you guys, as I understand it, are arguing, continue with the trade, but do it fairly, so that we can save the environment. Now, the example of losing the environment would be killing off the people who are working at the sweatshops at Joe Fresh's place in Bangladesh. if you trade with them, their argument would be, if you trade with them, they make 5 rupees so they can go feed themselves. That sounds good. So even though you're dealing with a pollution haven, even though you're dealing in a country that's producing and not protecting the environment and paying their workers 5 rupees, at least they're living. Now, how would you respond to Nisha's comment that, well, if you stop the trade or somehow regulate it, then those guys will not be making the 5 rupees, and their kids and even they will die. Now, I just want to know the answer to, what do you mean when you say fair trade? How are you going to regulate that otherwise free trade, which would keep them alive, and now you're going to regulate it and potentially kill it? What are you going to do? What's your solution? You say, well, regulate imports. What does that mean? That means you're buying less T-shirts, which means people at the Bangladesh factory and wherever that place was will die. So regulating, it sounds great, regulating imports, but what you're really saying is buy less T-shirts. Translation, more people die.